Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I've been really loving, that I want to share with everybody. That's my favorite thing to do on the channel, is to share really cool recommendations with my listeners who share a lot of similar tastes as me, and to hopefully get people popping up in the comments like, oh, I checked this out and really love it. Thank you for the recommendation. You introduced me to a new favorite band. You know, those are the types of things that are really fulfilling to me as a content creator and as a YouTuber on this platform. So thank you guys. When you guys let me know that information, it's really helpful and really meaningful to me. So thank you guys for your support. And today I've got a really important album that I've really been enjoying. This is a band called Azure, and this album is called Fim. This is an incredible group that is somewhat new to me. I dabbled in their previous album just slightly, but didn't really give it that much time, if I'm being honest. But this one, the ramp up was really interesting to me. It's this big, like, fantasy based concept album that really perked my ears because I'm a big fan of progressive rock, a big fan of fantasy as a genre as well. So I thought this could be the perfect marriage of those types of elements for someone like me. And yes, it is the perfect marriage of these elements for someone like me. This is a fantastic record, one of my favorites of the year, and I'm still unpacking and uncovering it. This is one of those types of albums that has a lot of complexity to it, has a lot of layers, and you have to listen to it a lot of times to really unpack everything that's going on in the music. So a little bit of an overwhelming first listen, if I'm being honest, because there's so much to grab hold of. It's a long record. There's a lot of different elements to it. The story's pretty complicated, and there's a lot to it as well. So it's a lot to take in on a first listen. You have to keep listening and keep letting it wash over you and start to really uncover and unpack some of these really cool tricks that they're doing. So Azure, to give a bit of background, is a fantasy-themed progressive rock band from Brighton in the UK. The project was formed by singer Christopher Sampson in 2015 while he was studying music in Brighton after being inspired by some of the vast different genres in the city that he was exploring, and he became close friends with lead guitarist Galen Stapley, which led to them coming out with their 2015 debut EP, and they've continued to progress from there. One of their most notable releases is their previous album, which was called Of Brine and Angels' Beaks. And yes, they really embrace the fantasy themes in their music, more so than probably any other modern prog band, I think. And, you know, it's a pretty big piece of a lot of modern prog bands, so that's saying something about them and their love for fantasy inspiration. But what we have here is this really big, sprawling concept record that goes through so many different moods and movements. And to me, what's really great about this release is that the music really captures the spirit of the story. To me, the best concept albums are able to bring this perfect marriage of storyline and musicality to the table to make them merge in a way that makes total sense. You know, if the music doesn't really fit the themes of the story that they're telling, then it won't mesh and it won't make sense. But in this case, the music really fits in what they're trying to tell and accomplish here. And I really commend them for being able to bring all these musical themes to the table and make it fit what's actually happening in the story itself. And the kind of music that you can expect on this release is modern progressive rock, little touchstones of progressive metal as well, especially in the big closing epic track Trench of Nalu, which is basically a love letter to modern progressive metal, in my opinion, with a lot of touchstones to bands like Dream Theater and Haken, and even harsher bands with some harsher vocals towards the end of the track. But throughout, you get a nice mixture of some modern progressive music with symphonic touchstones. Never sounds too outdated or like it's stuck in the 70s style or anything like that. I think one of their expert powers is bringing the music into a more modern setting. It almost reminds me of the flavor of bands like The Deer Hunter or Thank You Scientist. Not really that they sound a lot like those bands, but they have a similar spirit and vibrancy, and bringing in a modern touch to the music that's different than a lot of the other bands that kind of are looking a little bit backwards towards the classic prog of the 70s. And you hear some influences like funk music or pop music really baked into these, some jazzy moments, baked into this symphonic prog stew. And I find those little touchstones to be really interesting and bring a whole diversity of sound to this record as a whole. And there's so much here to really dive into that it's impossible to do in a review. So I feel bad that I'm probably not going to do this album complete justice, because you could do like a 30-minute deep dive into all of the themes and all of the different motifs that are happening throughout the record. But I'm still uncovering myself, and I wanted to bring this out to you guys to recommend it as quickly as possible. So I'm still really uncovering and unpacking the storyline and all of those types of things myself. Basically, it's a fantasy-inspired story about a character, a female protagonist called Femme Sallow, and this kind of adventurous, almost Dungeons and Dragons type journey that they go on. They have a companion in this lavender fox that accompanies them through parts of the storyline, and it's just a really fascinating adventure story that takes its twists and turns, and leads to some dark moments, but ultimately has kind of a heroic ending. So it's really a cool piece of music. And like I said, what's fun about it is that there's musical moments that really capture what's happening in the story. Like, for example, Sky Sailing, Beyond the Bloom, and Wilt. Sky Sailing feels very airy and light, and has this kind of symphonic breeziness to it that really gives you this feeling that you're floating and flying through the air. And then the Wilt portion, where things are kind of going downward and things are not quite as good, and things are kind of fading away, you get more of that in the sound. It's kind of a darker, more downward spiral in the music as well. So, but throughout the whole track, you hear things like this. Like the Lavender Fox is a very entertaining track, because you get the story from the perspective of the fox character, which is a kind of a fun, lighthearted piece to the story. You get these high-pitched vocals with this kind of weird shrill to it that is a little bit avant-garde, but I think fits in the storyline theme. But there's so many musical moments that are just really fun. The beginning is this bright symphonic prog opening in the Asdenist Din of Dawns, touch of jazziness, totally gorgeous. I love Samson's vocal styling, which is one of the most prominent features of this project, is Samson's vocals, which are just like off the chart amazing. He's able to stretch his voice in so many different directions, and he's able to wail. He's able to like really rein it in and tell the story. He has a lot of quirks to his voice and is able to do different things with it that most singers aren't able to do. It's like he has this full range to play with, and he doesn't disappoint. He's really prominent. Sometimes I almost feel like it veers into over the top quality, especially because there's a lot of lyrics throughout this record. There's so much vocal work because they're telling this story very in depth and with a lot of detail. So you almost get overwhelmed with all these like swirling vocal stylings that are coming at you throughout the whole runtime of the record. But I really have latched onto it and really love it, and his voice is just so pristine and sounds really beautiful, and I think it's one of the best in the modern prog space. He's slowly becoming one of my favorite vocalists that I've had the pleasure of hearing throughout my career as a modern prog fan. And it has a bit of like a pop sensibility to it at times, but it still can be very expressive, and it fits the music, and he's able to almost put on different voices, depending upon which character he's portraying or depending on what's happening in the storyline itself. He's like playing out the characters, but also being a bit of like the narrator at the same time. And it's a big job that he has to perform here, and I think he does it admirably. I'm not sure there's many other singers who could pull it off quite like he does here. But there's throughout a lot of cool instrumental breakdowns as well, where they're able to really showcase some great playing in the keyboards and on, guitars and shredding. There's nothing too overtly heavy through most of the record. Like I said, that final big epic track, Trench of Nalu, is probably the biggest example of them really embracing a prog metal touch to their music, even bringing in some harsh vocals towards the end. But don't let that turn you off, because it's very minimal and it fits the story perfectly. So I think it works in this context. But beyond that, it's very jazzy, progressive rock throughout the piece, with funk touches, really cool bass lines throughout, some slinky feels. Mount Metal and Key has some 80s synth washes that start the piece, giving it a bit of that flavor, but then it gets more fast-paced and more symphonic prog, with some cool guitar soloing and almost some like video game type sound style keyboards, like what Haken is prone to do. I mentioned Sky Sailing with that breezy, jazzy quality and that cool style to Chris Sampson's vocals. Really fun. I really like Doppelganger, which comes in the second half of the record, which brings a funk touch to their music, something like what the Deer Hunter explored on Entomai, but it's just a really fun experience to bop your head along to it, and it provides a good break from some of the heavier material that surrounds it. Agentic State that comes before it and the Portent and Trench of Knowledge that comes after are pretty dark, heavier pieces as we get into the meat of some of the more trying times that the lead character is going through that part of the record. So I think it's a nice break in that. It gives a bit of a whimsical feel to break up the darkness before we get to the finale of the storyline. So a lot of great stuff to unpack and uncover. A lot of great progressive rock styling done in a modern direction. Some funk styles thrown in, some jazz styles thrown in, some heavier metal moments. So it's very eclectic and has a lot going for it. And like I said, it's a pretty lengthy record. I believe it's somewhere around an hour and a half or so long, but it's just a joy and a blast to listen to and unpack and uncover. And if you're a fan of modern progressive rock and all that it can do, you like a more modern kind of unique flair to your songs, this definitely has that, and it's cool because it moves and morphs from one track to the next. It's a continuous story. It feels like you're on a journey with them. I love the adventurous nature of the music, and it really touches upon all these things that are meaningful to me as a progressive rock fan. And so much to love with this piece of music. I hope I did it some kind of justice in my expression of what to expect from it. I know, like I said, I could have done a deep dive. I didn't touch upon a lot of the different tracks that are available here, but I'll leave that to you to hopefully uncover and unpack on your own as well. So if this is something that interests you, if you like modern progressive rock, similar to bands like Haken and Thank You Scientist and Deer Hunter, who are putting their more modern, fresh spin and not just staying rooted and grounded in the 70s, but are using it as influences. If you don't mind some fantasy lyrics telling a big storyline, if you don't mind these expressive, almost theatrical styles and the vocal, this could be right up your alley, just like it was for me. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you appreciated this review. Let me know in the comments if you've heard this and have your own thoughts about what is on board, and I'd love to hear it. So thank you guys, and I'll hopefully catch you in a future episode. Bye, everybody.